A 4-year-old street urchin is humiliated at a fancy restaurant, but 2 minutes later, what she reveals stuns everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10 and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on you. The rain was lashing against the sprawling metropolis with a fury that seemed almost alive. The streets turned into miniature rivers, and pedestrians scurried desperately for cover. It was in this chaos that a tiny figure emerged from the storm, walking slowly along the drenched sidewalks. The 4-year-old girl, who looked barely 2 due to her extreme frailty, moved with trembling steps. Her bare feet splashed in the icy puddles, while her thin arms shook violently. Her ragged clothes clung to her small body, and wet hair partially covered a face that held an expression of surprising determination for someone so young. She stopped in front of the entrance to the most upscale restaurant in the area, the Gilded Spoon. The golden lights inside contrasted brutally with the darkness of the storm. Through the fogged glass, she could see elegantly dressed people enjoying meals that cost more than she saw in months. The girl pushed open the heavy glass door and entered, leaving a trail of water on the polished marble. An instant silence fell. All eyes turned to the unlikely creature who had dared to cross the boundary between 2 completely opposite worlds. The maitre d', a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed mustache and an impeccable suit, approached her with a poorly disguised look of distaste. His eyes scanned the child from head to toe, assessing every detail of her wretched appearance. "What do you think you're doing here?" he asked in a harsh voice, trying to keep his tone low so as not to disturb the other patrons. "This is no place for people like you." The girl looked up at him. There was something in that gaze that made him hesitate for a moment, a bright intelligence that seemed out of place in that fragile little body. "Just want to get out of the rain," she said in a soft but firm voice. "I won't bother anyone." "You're already bothering us just by being here," the maitre d' retorted, grabbing her arm with unnecessary force. "I'll call security if you don't leave immediately." It was then that something completely unexpected happened. The girl, still being dragged toward the door, began to speak with a clarity that silenced the entire restaurant. "Tasting menu: appetizer of foie gras with fig compote, lobster bisque soup, main course of filet mignon with black truffle sauce, accompanied by potato confit and wild asparagus. Dessert: Belgian chocolate mousse with red berries. Price: $450 per person." The maitre d' stopped dragging the child, his eyes wide with surprise. She continued, now in perfect French, reciting the same menu with a pronunciation that would make any Parisian sommelier envious. Then she repeated everything in English with a refined British accent. A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Customers whispered to each other, some discreetly recording with their phones. How could a child of such wretched appearance know not only the complete menu of one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, but also speak 3 languages with such perfection? In the most secluded corner of the establishment, a young man watched the whole scene with growing fascination. At 30 years old, he had the looks of a movie star. Dark hair, perfectly combed, a chiseled jawline, piercing deep blue eyes that contrasted with the melancholy he carried. His Italian suit cost more than many people earned in a year, and the Swiss watch on his wrist represented only a small fraction of his immense fortune, accumulated through investments in stocks and cryptocurrencies. But at that moment, all his wealth seemed insignificant in the face of the dignity of that child who faced humiliation with a courage that he himself had long lost. The widowed millionaire rose from his table, his footsteps echoing through the silent restaurant. Every movement radiated a natural authority that came not only from money, but from a magnetic presence that commanded respect. His eyes, however, revealed a deep pain that all his wealth could not cure. "Let go of the girl," he said in a calm but firm voice that brooked no argument. "Now." The maitre d' immediately recognized who this man was. His hands trembled slightly as he released the child's arm. "Sir, she can't stay here." It's against restaurant policy." "The policy," repeated the millionaire, moving closer, "says intelligent children aren't welcome, or just poor children." The girl looked at him with curiosity. There was something familiar in those melancholy eyes, a sadness that she recognized in herself. It was as if they both carried invisible wounds that only they could see. "I would like to offer a full meal to this young lady," he said, pulling a leather wallet from his pocket. "I believe that will resolve any issues her presence may cause." The girl's response surprised everyone once again. "Thank you for your kindness, sir, but I don't accept handouts," she said, with a politeness that contrasted drastically with her appearance. "I only accept job opportunities." The millionaire was silent for a long moment, studying this extraordinary creature who defied all his expectations. Here was a girl who seemed to have emerged from the cruelest streets of the city, but spoke like a little aristocrat and behaved with a dignity that many adults did not possess. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the restaurant something had changed forever. The encounter between these two beings wounded by life was just beginning, and neither of them imagined how their lives would intertwine in ways that would transform them both forever. The maitre d' remained motionless, unsure how to react to this completely unprecedented situation. The other customers watched in silence, witnesses to a moment that would become the first step of an extraordinary journey. The millionaire observed the girl with an expression that mixed admiration and perplexity. He had never met anyone, especially a child, who refused his financial assistance with such firmness. His blue eyes studied every detail of that determined little face, seeking to understand the mystery behind that small figure. "Work," he repeated, bending down to her level. "What kind of work could a girl your age do?" She stared directly at him, without the slightest trace of shyness or subservience. "I can translate conversations, do calculations, organize things. I can read and write in 3 languages. Her voice carried a confidence that contrasted brutally with her fragile appearance. "I just need an opportunity to prove it." The maitre d' tried to intervene, clearly uncomfortable with the situation that was spiraling completely out of his control. "Sir, perhaps it would be better if you gave us a few minutes," the millionaire interrupted in a tone that brooked no argument. His eyes did not stray from the girl for even a second. The child remained there, dripping water on the marble floor, but with an upright posture that demonstrated an unwavering dignity. The millionaire felt something stir in his chest, a sensation that he had not experienced in a long time. It was as if that small figure had awakened something that he thought was definitely buried, along with his deceased wife. "How did you learn all those languages?" he asked, genuinely curious. The girl's eyes became distant for a moment, as if she were accessing carefully guarded memories. "A lady taught me. She said knowledge was the only thing that no one could take away from me." Her voice became almost a whisper. "She disappeared a while ago." Something in the way she said those words made the millionaire's heart clench. There was a pain there that he recognized intimately, the pain of losing someone important, without warning, without goodbye, without explanation. "And where do you live now?" he asked. Although he already suspected the answer, the girl hesitated for the first time. Her eyes scanned the restaurant, observing the curious faces that were still watching them. "I manage," she said finally. "I have my places." The millionaire felt a wave of protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. It had been 2 years since he had lost his wife in an accident that still haunted him every night. Since then he had isolated himself from the world, immersing himself in work and investments as a way to escape the pain. His fortune grew exponentially. His net worth seemed endless. His investments in Bitcoin yielded astronomical profits. His dividends increased every quarter, but none of that could fill the void he carried. "Listen," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "I have a company. A big construction company. There's always paperwork to organize, documents to sort." He paused, studying her reaction. It would be a real job, with fair pay. The girl tilted her head as if she were evaluating the sincerity of the proposal. You don't even know if I'm good at what I say I do. Then show me. She looked around and saw a couple at the next table talking in French about the wines on the menu. Without hesitation, she approached them with purposeful steps. Excuse me, she said in perfect French, but the wine you are considering, the Chateau Margaux 2015, pairs perfectly with the dish you have chosen. Its acidity enhances the flavors of the truffle without masking the delicacy of the meat. The couple was speechless. The man, clearly a wine connoisseur by the way he had studied the menu, nodded slowly. She's absolutely right, he said to his wife in Portuguese, then addressing the girl. How do you know so much about wine pairing? I observe a lot, she replied simply, returning to the millionaire. He watched her with a mixture of astonishment and something that might have been paternal pride. How could a child who lived on the streets have knowledge about expensive wines and gastronomic harmony? Impressive, he admitted. But you still haven't answered me about where you live. The girl lowered her eyes for the first time. There's a place under the old bridge in the industrial district. It's not much, but it's safe. She raised her chin again. And I'm not alone there. You're not alone? I take care of other children, 3 of them, all 4 years old like me, but they don't know how to fend for themselves yet. There was a weight of responsibility in her voice that shouldn't exist in someone so young. They depend on me. The millionaire felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. That girl, who looked barely 2 years old, was taking care of 3 other children in conditions that were probably inhumane. His entrepreneurial mind immediately began to calculate costs, solutions, ways to help, but something in her posture warned him that he would need to take it slow. How old are you really? He asked. 4 years old. I know I look younger. Hunger does that. There was no self-pity in her voice, just fact. But my age doesn't matter. What matters is that I can work. At that moment, the millionaire made a decision that would change both their lives forever. All right. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, come to the business tower downtown, the tallest in the area. It's my company. Ask for the president's office. The girl's eyes lit up for the first time. Are you serious? Completely serious. But there's a condition. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If you're going to work for me, you need to be well-fed and rested. I can't have malnourished employees. She studied him for a moment, as if she were trying to decipher his true intentions. And the other children? We'll find a solution for them too. For the first time since entering the restaurant, a small smile appeared on the girl's face. It was a cautious but genuine smile that completely transformed her features. Suddenly, it was possible to see the child she should have been, beneath all that forced maturity. What's your name? He asked. The girl hesitated again. People call me a lot of things, none of them very nice. And what would you like to be called? She thought for a moment, as if she were choosing carefully. Can I choose any name? Anyone you want. Then, I want to be called Hope, she said. And there was something definitive about that choice, as if she were being reborn at that very moment. The millionaire smiled, the first genuine smile he had given in 2 years. Hope is a perfect name. Well, you can call me Mr. Bennett. The storm outside was beginning to subside, but inside the restaurant a new storm was just beginning, a storm of changes, of possibilities, of 2 wounded hearts that might be able to heal each other. Tomorrow at 9, she repeated, as if she were engraving it in her memory. Tomorrow at 9, he confirmed. She turned to leave, but he called her once more. Hope? Yes? The rain is still heavy. Do you want me to have someone take you to where you live? She shook her head. Thank you, but I know the way, and the other children are waiting for me. With that, she went out into the still falling rain, leaving behind a restaurant full of people who had witnessed something extraordinary and a millionaire who, for the first time in 2 years, felt something other than emptiness in his heart. Gabriel remained in the restaurant for another hour after the girl, now called Hope, had left. His thoughts revolved in circles, trying to process the extraordinary encounter he had just had. The image of that fragile child facing humiliation with such dignity had awakened something in his heart that he thought was dead forever. When he finally arrived at his mansion on the outskirts of the city, Gabriel walked through the silent corridors that echoed his lonely footsteps. The house was an impressive display of his financial success. Valuable works of art decorated the walls, Italian designer furniture filled the spacious rooms, and every detail reflected the refined taste that only a considerable fortune could provide. But that night, all that opulence seemed empty and cold. Gabriel went up the marble staircase to his office, where he usually spent the nights analyzing investments and stock market movements. The computer screens showed charts of his investments in real time. His stocks soared, his funds yielded significant profits, his cryptocurrencies appreciated exponentially. In terms of net worth, he was virtually unbeatable in the region. His assets were spread across different sectors: real estate, stocks, gold, treasury bonds. His construction company had grown so much that it now competed with the largest in the country. At 30 years old, he had reached a financial level that most people would never dream of achieving. However, as he watched the numbers grow on his screens, Gabriel could only think of the girl who had refused his financial assistance, demanding instead a job opportunity. There was something about her that intrigued him deeply, a combination of vulnerability and strength that had touched him unexpectedly. He got up and walked to the panoramic window that offered a full view of the city. Down there, in the shadows of the metropolis, Hope was probably returning to her makeshift shelter under the bridge, where she cared for 3 other abandoned children. The idea that 4 four-year-old children were living in precarious conditions while he contemplated his wealth from a luxurious mansion left him deeply disturbed. The next morning, Gabriel arrived at his office earlier than usual. He instructed his secretary, an efficient middle-aged woman named Ms. Sterling, to cancel his early meetings. He wanted to be available when Hope arrived. At 9 o'clock sharp, the intercom buzzed. Ms. Sterling announced that a girl was asking to see him. Gabriel smiled, impressed by her punctuality. "Send her up," he said, feeling a strange anticipation. It had been a long time since he had felt genuinely eager to meet someone. When Hope entered his office, Gabriel was even more impressed. Despite her still ragged clothes, she had clearly made an effort to present herself in the best possible way. Her hair was combed, her face clean, and she carried an old cardboard folder that she had probably found in some trash. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said, with a formal politeness that contrasted with her age. "I came to work." "Good morning, Hope. How did you sleep?" "Fine, thank you." She didn't elaborate on the conditions in which she had spent the night, but Gabriel could imagine. He led her to a small table that he had prepared especially for her, with organized papers and some simple sorting tasks. "Let's start with something basic," he explained. "These are contracts in Portuguese, English, and French that need to be organized by language and date." Hope nodded and immediately set to work. Gabriel pretended to be busy with his own affairs, but in reality he watched her every move. The girl worked with impressive concentration, separating the documents with precision and speed that was surprising. After an hour, she got up. "I'm done, Mr. Bennett." Gabriel checked her work and was speechless. Not only had she organized everything perfectly, but she had also created a color-coded classification system and had discreetly corrected some translation errors that even he had not noticed. "This is exceptional," he said, genuinely impressed. "How did you learn to do this?" "The lady who taught me said that organization is the basis of everything. She showed me how small details can make a big difference." Hope's eyes became distant again. She was very careful about things. Gabriel felt a pang of curiosity about this mysterious woman who had educated Hope. "Can you tell me more about her?" The girl hesitated. She was a teacher, the smartest I've ever known. She knew about a lot of things, numbers, words, people. Her voice became lower. She told me I was special, that I had a gift. But one day she just didn't come back. Didn't come back from where? She said she had important things to take care of. Problems with bad people who didn't want her to tell the truth about certain things. Hope frowned, as if she were trying to remember vague details. She seemed scared, but she said she needed to do what was right. Gabriel felt a chill. There was something about this story that sounded dangerous, as if the teacher had gotten involved in something bigger than just early childhood education. And after she disappeared, what happened to you? I ended up in the city orphanage. But there, Hope stopped talking, her eyes filling with a sadness that no child should carry. What happened there? Gabriel insisted softly. The director was cruel. She made us work all day, begging on the streets to bring in money. She said it was for our own good, but I knew she kept almost everything. Hope clenched her small fists. When I tried to tell people about what she was doing, no one believed me. They said I was a liar. Gabriel felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. The idea that a child so small had been forced to beg to support a corrupt institution made him nauseous. Is that why you ran away? Me and the other three. But they're younger than me, even though we're the same age. They don't know how to take care of themselves, so I take care of them. She raised her chin with pride. We manage well on our own. Gabriel observed that extraordinary girl who had taken on responsibilities that most adults would find overwhelming. There was a strength in her that was both inspiring and devastating. Hope, where exactly are you living? She hesitated, clearly suspicious. Why do you want to know? Because I worry about you. 4 children living alone. That can't be safe. It's safer than the orphanage, she said firmly. And I know how to take care of myself. Gabriel decided not to insist on the matter for now. It was obvious that Hope had developed a natural distrust of adults, and he would need to earn her trust, gradually. The rest of the morning passed quickly. Hope completed several tasks with an efficiency that left Gabriel increasingly impressed. During lunch, he ordered food from a nearby restaurant and watched as she ate with controlled voracity, clearly hungry, but trying to maintain good manners. Hope, he said when she finished eating, I would like you to come work here every day. The payment would be enough to buy food and clothes for you and your friends. Her eyes lit up. You're serious? Every day. Every day. And maybe we can find a way for you to have a better place to live. We don't want charity, she said quickly. It wouldn't be charity. It would be an employee benefit. Every good company takes care of its employees. Hope studied him for a long moment, as if she were trying to decipher his true intentions. Bennett felt that he was being assessed by a mind far more mature than should exist in a 4-year-old child. Okay, she said finally, but on one condition. What? If you ever try to separate us or send us back to that place, I'll leave and never come back. Bennett felt the weight of the responsibility he was taking on. There was something in the way she said that made him realize that Hope had been betrayed by adults before, and that her trust was something precious that needed to be carefully protected. I promise, he said solemnly. I will never do anything that might hurt you. When Hope left the office that afternoon, taking with her the first paycheck of her life, Bennett remained seated for a long time, contemplating the extraordinary change that had happened in his life in just 24 hours. For the first time in 2 years, he had something to care about besides numbers on a screen. 3 weeks had passed since Hope began working for Bennett, and a peculiar routine had been established between them. Every morning, punctually at 9 o'clock, she arrived at the office with her clothes carefully cleaned and her hair combed. During the day, she demonstrated a capacity for learning that constantly surprised Bennett, absorbing knowledge about business, organization, and even basic concepts of business management. But there was something that bothered him deeply. At the end of each day, when Hope said goodbye to return to her shelter under the bridge, Bennett felt a restlessness that grew day after day. He had discreetly tried to follow her a few times, but she seemed to have a sixth sense for detecting when she was being watched, always taking different routes and disappearing among the city's back alleys. On that Thursday morning, something was different. Hope arrived 15 minutes late, which had never happened before. Her face was paler than usual, and there was a tension in her movements that Bennett immediately noticed. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said, trying to sound normal, but her voice was slightly hoarse. "Good morning, Hope. Are you all right? You seem tired." "I'm fine," she replied quickly, heading for her work table. But Bennett noticed that she was trembling slightly. During the morning, Bennett discreetly observed how Hope struggled to maintain her usual concentration. She stopped from time to cough, and her small hands trembled as she held the papers. When she thought he wasn't looking, she rested her head in her hands, as if she were trying to fight a headache. At lunchtime, Bennett decided to act. "Hope, I need you to accompany me on a visit to a client," he lied. "It's important that you see how the external side of the business works." She hesitated. "I can't be gone too long. The other children—" "It won't take long," he assured her, already grabbing his car keys. Instead of going to any client, Bennett drove directly to the industrial district, following the clues he had discreetly collected in recent weeks about the possible locations where 4 children might be hiding. Hope only realized where they were going when it was too late to protest. "Mr. Bennett, what are we doing here?" she asked, a note of panic in her voice. "I want to meet your friends," he said softly, "and I want to see where you're living." "No, I told you I didn't want charity. If you see where we live, you'll want to take us away from there." Bennett stopped the car and turned to her. "Hope, look at me. You're sick. I can see it from the way you're trembling, from your cough, from your paleness. How can I help you if I don't know what the real situation is?" Tears began to form in her eyes. "I can't let them see the others like this. They've already suffered so much. And you've suffered a lot too," Bennett said gently, "but you don't have to suffer alone." After a long pause, Hope whispered, "Promise you won't separate us." "I promise." She guided him along a narrow path that led down under the old bridge. What Bennett saw when they arrived at the children's makeshift shelter left him speechless. It was worse than he had imagined in his darkest nightmares. Under the concrete structure of the bridge, the 4 girls had created a space using cardboard boxes, pieces of torn tarpaulin, and any material they could find. The floor was dirt. There were puddles of dirty water everywhere, and the smell of mold and dampness was suffocating. The other 3 children were huddled together in a corner, sharing a thin, tattered blanket. They all seemed to be the same age as Hope, but they were even more fragile and thin. When they saw Bennett, they hid behind each other, clearly terrified of the presence of an unknown adult. "It's okay," Hope said softly to them. "This is Mr. Bennett. He's a friend." Bennett knelt down slowly, trying not to scare the children any further. "Hi, girls. Hope told me about you. She said you were very brave." One of the girls with tangled blonde hair whispered something to Hope. She translated, "She wants to know if you're going to take us away." "I'm not going to take you anywhere without your wanting to," Bennett said sincerely, "but I'd like to help you get more comfortable." As he watched those 4 children living in conditions that no animal should endure, Bennett felt a wave of emotions that almost overwhelmed him. Anger at a system that had failed them, sadness for their circumstances, and a fierce determination to do something to change them. "Hope," he said carefully, "how long have you been living here?" 6 months, she replied, "since we ran away." "And how do you get food?" Hope exchanged nervous glances with the other girls. Sometimes people give us things. And I work for you now, so we buy food with my salary." Bennett realized that she was omitting part of the truth, probably to protect him from an even harsher reality. He looked around the shelter and noticed some details that made him better understand the situation. Small drawings made with charcoal on the concrete walls, showing birds flying, an improvised system for collecting rainwater, and a careful organization of the few belongings they possessed. "Did you do all this yourselves?" he asked, genuinely impressed with their ingenuity. "Hope taught us," said one of the girls, speaking for the first time. Her voice was small and hoarse. "She's very smart." Bennett looked at Hope with renewed admiration. At 4 years old, she had become not only the caretaker of 3 other children, but also their leader, protector, and teacher. It was a responsibility that must be overwhelming for someone so young. "Girls," he said after a moment, "I have a very big house. It has a lot of empty rooms, a big kitchen, bathrooms with hot water. Would you like to come visit me?" The 3 girls looked immediately at Hope, awaiting her decision. Bennett realized that she was clearly the leader of the group, and that any change in their lives would depend on her approval. "Is it just a visit?" Hope asked suspiciously. "Just a visit so you can see what it's like. If you don't like it, I'll bring you back here. Promise." Hope looked around the miserable shelter where they had survived for 6 months. Bennett could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire for safety and comfort for the girls she cared for versus the fear that it was a trap. "Can we think about it?" she asked finally. "Sure, but there's one thing that can't wait." Bennett paused, choosing his words carefully. "Hope, you're sick. I can see you have a fever. And looking at your friends, I don't think they're feeling well either." It was true. Now that he was paying attention, Bennett could see that all 4 children showed signs of illness: pale skin, glazed eyes, persistent cough. "It's nothing serious," Hope insisted, but her voice was getting weaker. "Maybe it isn't, but we need to be sure. Can I take you to a doctor just to check?" "Doctors cost money," said one of the girls. "We don't have money." "I do," Bennett said simply. "And it would be an honor to use part of my fortune to take care of you." Hope studied him for a long moment. Bennett could see that she was weighing her fears against the obvious needs of the girl she protected. "If we go to the doctor," she said finally, "can we come back here afterwards?" "If that's what you want." "Then, okay." As Bennett helped the 4 girls out of the shelter under the bridge, he knew that he was crossing a point of no return. There was no going back after seeing those conditions, after witnessing Hope's extraordinary courage and the trust that the others placed in her. As he drove toward the hospital, with 4 small, fragile figures in the back seat of his luxury car, Bennett felt that his life was changing in ways that he was not even beginning to understand. And for the first time since the loss of his wife, that change didn't scare him. It energized him. The public hospital was crowded when Bennett arrived with the 4 girls. The waiting room overflowed with sick people, crying children, and a general atmosphere of despair that made him question his decision to bring them there. But when he tried to suggest that they go to a private clinic, Hope shook her head firmly. "It's good here," she said, watching the other people in the room. "These people need the doctor more than we do." Bennett was impressed once again with her compassion. Even sick and taking care of 3 other equally fragile children, Hope still cared about strangers who might be in a worse situation. After 3 hours of waiting, they were finally called. The doctor, a tired middle-aged man with gentle eyes, examined each of the girls carefully. Bennett watched the tension grow on the professional's face as the examination progressed. "They have pneumonia," announced the doctor finally, addressing Bennett. "All 4 of them. It's common in children who live in damp, cold environments for extended periods." Bennett felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Is it serious?" "It can be, if it's not treated properly. They'll need medication, adequate rest, nutritious food, and most importantly, a dry, warm environment." The doctor paused, studying Bennett. "May I ask what your relationship is to these children?" Bennett hesitated. He didn't know exactly how to define his relationship with them. "I'm taking care of them." The doctor nodded, but Bennett noticed a flash of suspicion in his eyes. "I'm going to prescribe antibiotics and cough medicine, but sir, these children can't go back to where they were living." "It would be practically a death sentence." Hope, who had heard everything in silence, finally spoke. "Doctor, if we don't go back to our place, where will we live?" "Well," the doctor looked at Bennett, "I imagine you have plans for that." Bennett felt the weight of 4 pairs of eyes on him. The 3 younger girls looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear, while Hope studied him with her usual intensity, trying to decipher his true intentions. "Of course," he said, although he had no idea how to make that a reality. "We'll find a solution." When they left the hospital with bags full of medication, Bennett drove in silence, his mind working furiously. He couldn't let the girls go back to that damp shelter under the bridge, but he also knew that Hope wouldn't accept charity. He needed to find a way to help them that preserved her dignity. "Mr. Bennett," Hope said from the back seat, "are you mad at us?" "Mad? Why would I be mad?" "Because now you know we're trouble, sick, we're going to cost money." Bennett stopped the car immediately, parking on the side of the road. He turned to look at her, seeing the tears that were beginning to form in her eyes. "Hope, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. You're not trouble. You're brave children who have survived situations that most adults couldn't handle. And as for the money—" He paused, thinking about his investments that grew automatically every minute. "I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. It would be an honor to use a part of it to take care of you." "But we can't pay you back," whispered one of the other girls. "You're already paying me back," Bennett said softly. "Hope works for me and does an excellent job. And you've reminded me of important things that I had forgotten." "What kind of things?" asked Hope, curious. Bennett thought for a moment. "You've reminded me that there are more important things than money. You've reminded me what it's like to feel that my life has a purpose beyond just accumulating wealth." When they arrived at Bennett's mansion, the 3 girls gasped. The property was impressive. Tall iron gates, perfectly manicured gardens, a house that looked like a palace compared to the shelter where they had spent the last 6 months. "Is this a hotel?" asked one of them in a low voice. "No," smiled Bennett. "It's my house, and today you are my guests." Hope remained silent as he guided them through the house. Bennett could see that she was processing everything, the opulence, the works of art, the expensive furniture. But instead of admiration, there was something like concern on her face. "Mr. Bennett," she said when the other girls were distracted exploring the living room, "all this must have cost a lot of money." "It did," he admitted. "And you live here alone?" "I do." She was silent for a moment. "It must be very lonely." The simple observation hit Bennett like a lightning bolt. A 4-year-old child had identified in seconds something that he had been trying to ignore for 2 years. "Sometimes it is," he said honestly. "Why don't you have a family?" Bennett hesitated. He had never talked about his wife to anyone since the accident, but there was something in the direct way Hope asked that made him want to be equally direct. "I had a wife. She passed away 2 years ago." "Passed away like my teacher passed away?" "Not exactly. My wife died in a car accident." Hope processed that information with the seriousness that she applied to everything. "You must have loved her very much." "I did," said Bennett, feeling the familiar pain tighten his chest. "And that's why you stay alone in this big house." Yes. I couldn't imagine sharing this space with anyone else." Hope looked around the luxurious room, then back at him. "But now can you imagine it?" The question caught him completely off guard. Could he imagine it? For the first time in 2 years, Bennett tried to visualize that house full of life, of children's laughter, of movement and purpose. The image didn't scare him as he expected it to scare him. "Maybe," he admitted. That night, after the girls had taken hot baths, eaten a nutritious meal, and taken their medications, Bennett settled them into one of the guest rooms. He had provided proper beds, clean clothes, and everything they might need. But when he went to check on them before bed, he found all four huddled together in a single bed, hugging each other just as they did in the shelter under the bridge. "Don't you want to sleep each in your own bed?" he asked softly. "We sleep together," explained Hope. "It's safer that way and warmer." Bennett felt his heart clench. Even in safety, in a warm house, these children still needed each other to feel protected. "Okay," he said. "Sleep as you feel most comfortable." As he was leaving the room, Hope called him. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything." "Thank you," he replied sincerely. Later, in his own room, Bennett lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the extraordinary transformation that had happened in his life. For the first time since his wife's death, his house didn't feel like a mausoleum of memories. It felt like a home. But in the back of his mind, a concern grew. He knew that he couldn't simply keep the girls in his house indefinitely without facing legal issues. And there was something about the story of the missing teacher that bothered him deeply. The next morning, Bennett woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in years, children's laughter echoing through the halls of his house. For a moment, lying in bed, he simply smiled and listened. Then he got up, dressed, and went down to discover what kind of cheerful chaos awaited him. What he found in the kitchen made him stop at the door. The four girls were trying to make breakfast, with Hope directing the operation like a little boss. There was flour everywhere, broken eggs on the floor, and what appeared to be an attempt at pancakes burning on the stove. "Need some help?" he offered, trying not to laugh. "We're trying to make breakfast for you," explained Hope, a smudge of flour on her forehead. "To thank you for letting us stay here last night. That's very kind of you," Bennett said, taking control of the stove before the pancakes turned to charcoal. As they cooked together, Bennett realized something extraordinary happening. His house, which had been silent and empty for so long, was alive again, and for the first time since he lost his wife, he didn't feel lost. The routine that was established at the mansion during the following 2 weeks brought a transformation that Bennett could never have anticipated. The girls recovered quickly from pneumonia, their cheeks gaining color and their voices becoming stronger every day. But more than that, they were bringing life to every corner of the house that had remained silent for so long. Bennett found that waking up to the sound of children's laughter was infinitely better than waking up to the oppressive silence that had accompanied him for 2 years. His mornings now began with small feet running through the halls, animated conversations during breakfast, and the satisfaction of seeing 4 children who had known only deprivation discovering small luxuries like hot water and abundant food. Hope continued to work in his office, but now her 3 friends accompanied her. Bennett had improvised a small area for them with books, paper, and crayons. It was fascinating to watch how Hope naturally assumed the role of teacher, teaching the other girls the things she had learned from her mysterious educator. "Let's practice math," Bennett heard her say on a sunny afternoon. "If Mr. Bennett has 10 apples and gives 3 to each of us, how many are left for him?" "None," shouted one of the girls, and they all laughed. "No, silly," Hope corrected patiently. 10 minus 12 is, well, you can't have less than 2 apples, so he would have to buy 2 more. Bennett smiled from his desk, impressed with the practical logic that she applied even to the simplest mathematical problems. There was an intelligence in her that went beyond the academic, an intuitive understanding of how the world worked. But his growing happiness was brutally interrupted on a Tuesday afternoon when his secretary announced that there was an unscheduled visitor waiting in the reception area. "Who is it?" asked Bennett, annoyed by the interruption. "A lady who identifies herself as the director of the city orphanage. She says she needs to talk to you about some children who are under your care." Bennett felt the blood run cold in his veins. He looked at Hope, who had stopped working and was completely still, her big eyes fixed on him with an expression of pure terror. "She found us," whispered Hope, her voice barely audible. The other 3 girls huddled behind her instinctively, like small animals seeking protection. Bennett could see the fear in all their faces, and a protective fury that he didn't know he possessed began to burn in his chest. "Stay calm," he said to Hope. "I'll take care of this." When Bennett went down to the reception area, he found a stern-looking woman, about 50 years old, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and formal clothes that seemed to have been chosen specifically to intimidate. Her small, cold eyes sized him up from head to toe, clearly calculating his financial worth. "Mr. Bennett," she said in a voice that was too sweet to be sincere, "my name is Evelyn Shaw, director of the city orphanage. I've come to retrieve 4 children who ran away from our institution a few months ago." "I don't know what you're talking about," Bennett replied coldly. "Oh, but I believe you do," she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've received information that 4 girls, approximately 4 years old, are living in your home, girls who are legally under my care." Bennett felt a trap closing around him. "And what information would that be?" "An employee from the public hospital contacted me. Apparently a wealthy man brought 4 sick children in for treatment last week. It wasn't hard to connect the dots." She took a step closer, her voice becoming harsher. "Those children belong to my institution. I'm here to take them back. And if they don't want to go back?" Evelyn laughed, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the marble lobby. "4-year-olds don't have a choice in these matters, sir, especially troubled children like these." "Troubled? Oh, yes, especially that little liar who considers herself the leader, always making up absurd stories about mistreatment, trying to cause problems where they don't exist." She paused, studying Bennett's reaction. "I imagine she's filled your head with lies about me." Bennett kept his expression neutral, but internally he was seething. The way this woman talked about Hope, about all of them, revealed exactly the kind of person she was. "I assume you have legal documentation proving your authority over these children." Evelyn smiled more broadly. "Naturally." She took a folder from her bag and held out some papers. "Everything in perfect legal order." Bennett examined the documents, his heart sinking. They seemed legitimate, with official stamps and signatures that gave the woman legal authority over Hope and her friends. "Now," Evelyn continued, "I appreciate your kindness towards these girls, but they need to go back where they belong. The orphanage offers structure, discipline and education that a private home simply can't provide." "What kind of structure?" asked Bennett, trying to keep his voice controlled. "Oh, we have very effective methods. Therapeutic work on the city streets. It helps the children understand the value of money and humility, strict routines that teach discipline, and of course, correction when necessary." Her eyes gleamed with something that made Bennett feel nauseous. "These girls have learned some bad habits, living wild on the streets. They'll need intensive re-education." Bennett understood perfectly what she was describing. The therapeutic activities on the streets were forced begging. The strict routines were abusive control, and the correction was physical punishment. "And if I refuse to hand them over?" Evelyn tilted her head, like a predator studying its prey. "Then I'll have to involve the authorities, and frankly, a single man keeping 4 little girls in his home without legal authorization. Well, that could lead to some very uncomfortable questions, don't you think?" The threat was clear. She was implying that she could accuse him of improper motives if he resisted. Bennett realized that he was dealing with someone who used the legal system as a weapon. "I need time to consider this," he said finally. "Time?" Evelyn frowned. "There's nothing to consider. Either you hand over the children now, or I call the police." "Then call the police," said Bennett, his patience wearing thin. "And I'll call my lawyer. Let's see who has more influence in this city's legal system." Evelyn's face twisted into an expression of cold anger. "You don't know who you're dealing with, young man. I have important connections in this city. I can make your life very difficult." "And you don't know who you're dealing with," replied Bennett, using all his imposing presence. "My fortune gives me access to the best lawyers, the most influential people, and unlimited resources to protect these children. You can try to intimidate me all you want." Evelyn took a step back, clearly reassessing her strategy. "Very well," she said finally, "but this isn't over. These children belong to me legally, and I'll have them back, one way or another." After she left, Bennett rushed upstairs to his office. He found the 4 girls exactly where he had left them, but now they were huddled together, all crying silently. "Is she gone?" asked Hope in a trembling voice. "For now," admitted Bennett. "But she'll be back." "I knew this was going to happen," said Hope, tears streaming down her face. "We couldn't be happy forever. People like us don't deserve it." Bennett knelt in front of them, holding Hope's small hands. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to say. You do deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved, cared for, and protected. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that happens." "But she has legal papers," whispered one of the other girls. "Does that mean we have to go back?" "Not necessarily," said Bennett, although he wasn't sure if that was true. "There are other legal options. I can try to adopt you officially." "Even if it costs a lot of money?" asked Hope. Bennett smiled, remembering his investments that grew automatically as they spoke. "I have more money invested in stocks and cryptocurrencies than I could use in several lifetimes. If I need to spend it to keep you safe, it's the best investment I've ever made." That night, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, Bennett stayed awake planning his strategy. He knew Evelyn would be back, probably with legal reinforcements, and he knew that the battle he was about to face would test not only his financial resources, but also his determination to protect the 4 small lives that had become the center of his world. For the first time since meeting Hope, Bennett felt genuine fear. Not fear for himself, but for them, and that fear motivated him in a way that all his wealth never had. The early morning found Bennett on the phone with the best law firm in the city, mobilizing resources that he hadn't used in years. His fortune, carefully built through strategic investments in stocks and high-yield funds, would finally have a purpose that went beyond simply accumulating numbers in a bank account. "I need all the paperwork ready by the end of the afternoon," he told the lead attorney, Mr. Hawthorne. "I don't care about the cost. I want to initiate the adoption process immediately." Meanwhile, the girls remained unusually quiet during breakfast. Bennett could see that Hope was processing the situation with her usual analytical mind, trying to find solutions to a problem that seemed to have no safe way out. "Mr. Bennett," she said finally, "can I talk to you alone?" The other 3 girls stayed playing in the living room while Bennett and Hope withdrew to the office. She closed the door carefully and turned to him with an expression that was too serious for a 4-year-old. "You don't need to fight for us," she said directly. "We know how to take care of ourselves." "Hope." "No, let me finish." Her voice had a firmness that contrasted with her physical fragility. "If we stay here, Director Shaw will make your life hell. She has ways of doing that. We've seen her destroy other people who tried to help us before." Bennett felt a chill. "Other people tried to help you?" Hope nodded gravely. "A couple who had a bakery downtown. They gave us bread sometimes when we were hungry. When Evelyn found out, they lost their business license for sanitary violations that appeared out of nowhere. Their business went bankrupt in 2 months. And you think she did that on purpose?" "I know she did. I heard her talking on the phone with someone important, laughing about how she had taught a lesson to people who interfered with her property." Hope's eyes filled with tears. "That's what we are to her, property. Property that generates money." Bennett knelt in front of her, holding her small, trembling hands. "Hope, listen carefully. I'm not a baker with a small business that can be easily destroyed. I have enough resources, influence, and determination to face anything Evelyn tries to do." "But what if she really manages to take us away? What if her papers are stronger than yours?" It was a question that Bennett had asked himself all night. The truth was that he wasn't sure. Evelyn seemed to have solid legal documentation, and even worse, connections in the system that could make the fight much more difficult than he anticipated. "Then we'll fight until there are no more options," he said firmly. "And if that happens, well, we'll find another way." "What way?" Bennett hesitated. He had thought of drastic possibilities during the sleepless night, maybe moving to another city or even to another country. His international assets and investments in foreign currencies would make that possible, but he didn't want to scare Hope with such extreme plans. "A way," he repeated simply. That afternoon, the situation took an unexpected turn. Bennett was reviewing legal documents when Miss Sterling announced another unscheduled visit. This time, however, it wasn't Evelyn who was waiting in the reception area. It was a young man, maybe a few years younger than Bennett, with simple but clean clothes and a determined expression on his face. He stood up when Bennett appeared, extending his hand hesitantly. "Mr. Bennett, my name is Kieran Mendez. I think we need to talk about the girls." Bennett studied him carefully. There was something familiar in those eyes, an intelligence that vaguely resembled someone he knew. "What girls?" he asked cautiously. "The 4 who are living with you, especially the one named Hope." Kieran paused, taking a deep breath. "She's my sister." Bennett's world stopped. He stared at the young man in front of him, processing this impossible information. "Your sister?" "Younger sister. I've been looking for her for 2 years." Kieran's voice was laden with emotion. "When our parents died, she was sent to the orphanage while I was struggling to get into a place where I could care for her. When I finally got financially stable, I went to pick her up and they told me she had run away." Bennett felt the ground shift under his feet. "How did you find me?" "I've been investigating Evelyn Shaw for months. I discovered that she has a network of informants around the city who keep her informed about any adult who shows interest in the children at the orphanage." Kieran leaned forward. "When you took the girls to the hospital, someone informed her. And when she came to visit you yesterday, I followed her. You were here yesterday?" "Outside. I saw when she left looking furious." Kieran smiled for the first time. "I imagine you didn't give in to her demands." Bennett studied the man in front of him. There was something about him that inspired confidence, a sincerity that contrasted dramatically with Evelyn's manipulative deceitfulness. But at the same time, the possibility of losing Hope to someone else, even if it was her brother, made his heart clench painfully. "If you're really her brother, why haven't you looked for her before?" "I have," replied Kieran, his voice becoming more intense. "I've spent the last 2 years working day and night to get enough money to offer her a proper home. I finally got a stable job as an accountant and rented a small but clean apartment." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "But when I went back to the orphanage, Evelyn said that Hope had been adopted by a family in another city. It took me months to discover that she was lying." "And how do you know that the girls are really safe with me?" Kieran smiled again. "And this time, Bennett definitely saw the resemblance to Hope, because I've spent 2 weeks watching your house discreetly. I've seen the girls playing in the garden. I've seen how they laugh, how they seem healthy and happy. But mostly," he paused, his eyes filling with tears, "I've seen my little sister smile for real for the first time since our parents died." Bennett felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Relief at knowing that there was someone else willing to fight for Hope, but also a terrible fear of losing her just when he had begun to imagine a future with her and the other girls. "What exactly do you want?" he asked carefully. "I want my sister back," said Kieran simply. "But not the way Evelyn wants. I can see that you genuinely care about her and that she's happy here. I don't want to destroy that." "Then what are you suggesting?" "Partnership. You have resources and influence that I don't have. I have legal family ties that can complicate any attempt by Evelyn to take her back to the orphanage." Kieran leaned forward. "Together, we can protect them in a way that neither I nor you could do alone." Bennett considered the proposal. It made sense from a strategic point of view, but there were complicated emotional issues involved. Does Hope know you exist? She was very young when our parents died. Maybe she doesn't remember me consciously, but... Kieran took a faded photograph from his pocket. This is our family, taken a few weeks before the accident. Bennett looked at the photograph and felt his heart clench. A young and happy family, smiling parents, a boy of perhaps 16 years, and a little girl in her mother's arms who was unmistakably Hope, only a few years younger. Can I show this to her? That's why I'm here. When they went upstairs to the office, Bennett found the 4 girls exactly where he had left them. Hope was teaching math to the others, using crayons to make the numbers more interesting. "Hope," said Bennett softly, "there's someone here who would like to meet you." She looked up and saw Kieran. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, something changed in her expression. Not conscious recognition, but something deeper. A buried memory that was beginning to awaken. Kieran knelt down slowly, extending the photograph. "Hi, little sister," he said with a choked voice. "I'm Kieran, your big brother." Hope looked at the photograph, her eyes widening. Bennett could see her analytical mind working, connecting dots, recovering fragmented memories. "Kieran," she whispered finally. "The Kieran who taught me to count stars." "The same one," he smiled, tears streaming down his face. What happened next was one of the most moving moments that Bennett had ever witnessed. Hope ran into her brother's arms, and the two hugged each other with the intensity of 2 years of separation and longing. But as he watched the reunion, Bennett couldn't avoid the fear that was growing in his heart. Now that Hope had found her biological family, would there still be room for him in her life? The night that followed the reunion was one of the most emotionally complex that Bennett had ever lived. Hope spent hours talking with Kieran, recovering fragmented memories of her childhood before the tragedy that separated the family. Bennett watched from afar, feeling simultaneously happy for her and terrified by the possibility of losing her. "I remember you teaching me how to make origami," said Hope, her eyes sparkling as the memories came back. "And how you carried me on your back when I got tired of walking." "You were so small," replied Kieran, his voice choked. "You could barely pronounce my name right." "You called me Keen because you couldn't say the R." Bennett felt a pang of jealousy that surprised him with its intensity. For weeks, it had been he who received Hope's smiles, who heard her stories, who felt special for having earned her trust. Now, watching her reconnect with her past, he wondered what his place in her life really was. But it was Hope who resolved his internal dilemma in a way that he would never have expected. "Kieran," she said after hours of conversation, "I'm very happy that you found me, but I need you to understand something." She paused, looking in Bennett's direction. "Mr. Bennett isn't just someone who is helping me. He's become like a father to me." The words hit Bennett like lightning. He had worried so much about losing her that he hadn't realized how much she also cared about him. "And the girls here," Hope continued, indicating her 3 friends who were sleeping huddled together on the sofa. "They're my family too now. I can't abandon them." Kieran nodded slowly, his eyes moving from Hope to Bennett. "I understand, and I'm not asking you to abandon anyone. In fact," he hesitated as if he were carefully weighing his words, "I have a proposal that might work for all of us." "What kind of proposal?" asked Bennett, his voice cautious. "I've looked into your information, Mr. Bennett. I know you have considerable resources and an impeccable reputation in business. I also know that you genuinely care about my sister and her friends." Kieran leaned forward. "And I have something that you need in this fight against Evelyn. Legal family rights." Bennett began to understand where Kieran was going. "Go on. If I officially transfer my guardianship of Hope to you through adoption, Evelyn loses any legal claim over her. And if you adopt the other 3 girls at the same time, they're protected too. But that would mean you would be giving up your rights over her," Bennett observed. "Not necessarily. I would still be her legal uncle. I would still be part of the family." Kieran smiled. "And frankly, I can see that she needs more stability than my accountant's salary could offer." Bennett felt a wave of relief, but also of responsibility. The proposal made sense from a legal and practical point of view, but the emotional implications were enormous. "Hope, what do you think about this?" he asked. She studied him with those intelligent eyes that always seemed to see through everything. "You really want to adopt me? Forever?" "More than anything in the world," replied Bennett honestly. "And you'll take care of my friends too, as if they were my own daughters." Hope smiled, that radiant smile that completely transformed her face. "Then yes, I want that too." In the following 2 days, Bennett mobilized all the resources at his disposal. His lawyers worked day and night preparing the documentation. His contacts in the highest echelons of government expedited processes that normally would have taken months, and a considerable amount of his wealth was invested in ensuring that everything was done as quickly and legally as possible. But Evelyn didn't stand still. On Thursday morning, she showed up again, this time accompanied by 2 intimidating-looking men and a woman who introduced herself as a government social worker. "Mr. Bennett," said the social worker, a middle-aged woman with a grim expression, "we have received a formal complaint that there are children living in your residence without proper legal documentation. I need to inspect the conditions in which they are being kept." Bennett felt his heart race, but he maintained his composure. "Naturally, you can examine everything you want." What followed was one of the most tense hours of his life. The social worker examined every corner of the house, asked detailed questions about the girls' routine, their medical care, education, and overall well-being. Bennett answered everything patiently, but he could see Evelyn watching every interaction with calculating eyes. "The children seem well cared for," admitted the social worker finally. "But that doesn't change the fact that they are here without proper legal authorization." "Actually," said Bennett calmly, pulling out a folder of documents, "we do have legal authorization." Evelyn frowned. "Impossible. I didn't authorize." "You don't have to," interrupted Bennett. "Kieran Mendez, biological brother of one of the children, officially transferred his guardianship to me through an emergency adoption process. Since he had family rights superior to those of the orphanage, his authorization invalidates any claim that you may have." Evelyn's face twisted in pure anger. "This is a sham. That boy appeared out of nowhere." "That boy," said Kieran, entering the room at that exact moment, "has a birth certificate, identity documents, and can prove kinship through a DNA test if necessary." Bennett watched Evelyn realize that her strategy had collapsed. But instead of retreating with grace, she went on the most desperate and dangerous attack. "Very well," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "If you want to play that game, let's play it. But you won't. They know who they're dealing with." Evelyn turned to Mr. Bennett with a cruel smile. "Mr. Bennett, I imagine you don't know the truth about your precious Hope." "What truth?" Bennett asked, confused. "She's not the innocent victim she pretends to be. That girl is dangerous, manipulative. She was responsible for the death of the teacher she speaks so fondly of." Bennett felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "What are you talking about?" "The teacher, Maria Santos, disappeared because she was being blackmailed. And who do you think was blackmailing her? A 4-year-old with abnormal intelligence and a complete lack of moral conscience." "That's a lie," Kieran said firmly. "Is it? Then why did the teacher leave a note before she disappeared, describing how one of her students had discovered compromising information about her and was using that information to get special privileges?" Evelyn smiled cruelly. "Do you think a normal 4-year-old knows 3 languages and advanced mathematics? She learned all of that through manipulation and blackmail." Bennett looked at Hope, who was standing on the staircase, clearly listening to everything. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a steely determination. "Is that true, Hope?" Evelyn asked directly. Tell your new protectors how you discovered that Maria had a past she wanted to hide. Tell them how you threatened to reveal everything if she didn't give you special attention. That's not true, Hope said, her voice small but firm. I loved Maria. I would never do anything to hurt her. Liar, Evelyn shouted. You've always been a manipulative liar. It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Hope descended the stairs slowly, her small hands trembling, but her voice becoming stronger with each word. You want to know the truth about Maria? She said, staring directly at Evelyn. She found out that you were stealing money from the orphanage donations. She had documents proving everything. And when she threatened to tell the authorities, you made her disappear. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn paled, but tried to maintain her composure. That's ridiculous. A 4-year-old can't. I overheard you on the phone, Hope continued, her voice growing in confidence, talking to someone about how you'd taken care of the Maria problem. I hid under the desk in your office and heard everything. Bennett watched Evelyn's expression gradually change from disdain to panic. Ms. Sterling had also noticed the change. Ms. Shaw, she said carefully, these are very serious accusations. They're lies from a disturbed child, Evelyn insisted, but her voice was too shrill, too desperate. Then you won't mind if we investigate, Ms. Sterling said calmly. I'm going to recommend a full audit of the orphanage's finances. Bennett saw Evelyn realize that she had fallen into a trap she herself had created. In her haste to discredit Hope, she had opened a door she could no longer close. This isn't over, Evelyn muttered as she headed for the door. You don't know what I'm capable of. After she left with her henchman, Bennett knelt in front of Hope. Why didn't you ever tell me about Maria and what really happened? Because I was afraid no one would believe me, she replied simply. Adults never believe it when kids tell bad things about other adults. Bennett hugged her tight, feeling a mixture of pride and protectiveness that almost overwhelmed him. I'll always believe you, he promised. Always. But as he held Hope in his arms, Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that the war with Evelyn was only just beginning, and that she had shown she was willing to use any weapon, no matter how dirty, to get what she wanted. Evelyn's revenge came in a way Bennett could never have predicted. A week after the confrontation at his house, he arrived at the office to find a crowd of reporters waiting at the door of his company. Camera flashes exploded as he tried to pass, and microphones were shoved in his direction. Mr. Bennett, is it true that you keep children in your home without proper supervision? There are allegations that one of the girls was forced to work in inappropriate conditions. Can you comment on the accusations of child exploitation? Bennett pushed through the crowd, his heart pounding. In the elevator, he immediately called home, his hands shaking as he dialed. Kieran, where are the girls? Locked in the house with me, watching television. Bennett, what's going on? There are news vans on the street. Evelyn, she leaked a distorted version of the story to the press. Bennett massaged his temples, feeling a headache forming. I'm coming home now. When he arrived at the mansion, Bennett found the girls huddled in the living room, clearly frightened by the chaos outside. Hope was paler than usual, her small hands clutching a book to her chest. Mr. Bennett, she said as soon as she saw him, the people on television are saying bad things about us. They say we're children working illegally. Bennett knelt in front of them, trying to convey a calm he didn't feel. Those are lies, you know that. Evelyn is trying to hurt us by spreading false stories. But will people believe her? Asked one of the other girls in a tiny voice. Some people might believe it at first, Bennett admitted honestly. But the truth always comes out in the end. Kieran approached, holding a tablet with online news articles. It's worse than it looks. She not only distorted the story about Hope working for you, she also claimed that the girls are being held against their will, that you're using them for some kind of child exploitation scheme. Bennett read the headlines and felt nauseous. The words were carefully chosen to suggest the worst without making direct accusations that were specific enough to constitute defamation. Evelyn had played dirty, but cleverly. "There's more," Kieran continued, his voice heavy. "She got a court order. She claimed that the children are in immediate danger and needs to remove them for their own safety while the allegations are investigated." Bennett's blood ran cold. "When?" "Any time. Social workers could show up here with a court order today." Bennett looked at the four girls, seeing the fear growing in their eyes. After everything they had been through, after finally finding safety and happiness, Evelyn was managing to destroy everything, using the legal system against them. "We're not going to let that happen," he said with steely determination. "Bennett," Kieran lowered his voice, "she has a court order. If we resist, it'll be worse for everyone." "Then we won't resist. We'll leave her jurisdiction." "What do you mean?" Bennett was already moving, his business mind working rapidly. "I have properties in other states, properties I bought through offshore companies, which would take time to trace. We can go there while my lawyers dismantle this farce." "That would be flight, Bennett. It could be considered kidnapping." "Kidnapping my own adopted daughters," Bennett smiled grimly. "Let them try to prove that in court." Over the next 2 hours, Bennett mobilized resources he hadn't used in years. His diversified assets included not only financial investments, but also strategically located properties. A secluded farm in the countryside of a neighboring state, purchased years ago through a complex web of companies that made traceability almost impossible. "Where are we going?" Hope asked as they quickly packed their few possessions. "To a safe place," Bennett replied. "A place where Evelyn can't find us while we resolve this legally." "Is it like running away?" Bennett paused, considering how to explain the complex situation to a 4-year-old. "Sometimes, when bad people try to use good rules to do bad things, we need to go to a place where we can show that the rules are being used wrong." Hope nodded gravely. "Like when the director used the orphanage rules to hurt us, even though the rules were made to protect us." "Exactly like that." They left the mansion through the service tunnels that Bennett had built years before out of corporate paranoia. The reporters were still in front of the property, completely unaware that their targets had disappeared. The drive to the farm took 4 hours, Bennett driving along back roads to avoid any possibility of tracking. The girls slept in the back seat, exhausted by the stress of the day. Kieran remained silent in the passenger seat, clearly struggling with the morality of the situation. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" he asked finally. "We're protecting 4 innocent children from a woman who has already proven capable of anything to get what she wants," Bennett replied. "If that's not right, then the system is more broken than I thought." The farm was exactly what Bennett expected. Isolated, well-equipped, and completely off the radar of any immediate investigation. It had been bought years before as an investment and emergency refuge, but he never imagined that the emergency would involve protecting children instead of financial assets. "It's pretty here," Hope said when she woke up and saw the open fields around the property. "It looks like the drawings in storybooks that Maria used to show me." Bennett felt a pang at the mention of the missing teacher. "Hope, can you tell me more about Maria? What exactly did Evelyn do to her?" Hope was quiet for a long moment, watching the trees sway in the wind. "Maria was different from the other adults at the orphanage. She really cared about us. She taught me extra things when no one was looking, gave me books to read in secret. And she found something out about Evelyn. She found papers in the office, papers that showed Evelyn was taking money that was supposed to buy food and medicine for us, but using it for other things. Maria got very angry when she found out." "What happened next?" "Evelyn found out that Maria had found out. There was a big fight in the office. I was cleaning the hallways when I heard it." Hope closed her eyes, as if reliving painful memories. "Evelyn said she was going to take care of the Maria problem, and 3 days later she disappeared. Did Maria say anything to you before she disappeared?" "She gave me this." Hope took a small object from her pocket, a simple silver pendant with a small bird engraved on it. She said that if anything happened to her, I should keep this and show it to someone I trusted. She said it was important. Bennett examined the pendant carefully. It looked old, and there was something engraved on the back that was too worn to read. "Why didn't you ever show me this before?" "Because I was scared," Hope admitted. "Maria said there were dangerous people who didn't want certain truths to be told. I was afraid that if anyone knew I had this, something bad would happen to me too." Bennett held the pendant, feeling the weight of yet another mystery. Every answer about Hope's past seemed to create two new questions. And now, fleeing through the night with 4 children who depended completely on him, Bennett wondered if he was really protecting them or just delaying an inevitable confrontation. But looking at Hope asleep in his arms, he knew he would do it all again. Some risks were worth taking, and some battles needed to be fought, no matter the cost. The farm welcomed them in the darkness, a temporary refuge in a war that was only just beginning. The 3 days on the farm brought a deceptive calm that Bennett knew wouldn't last. While the girls explored the open fields and seemed to relax for the first time in weeks, he spent hours on the phone with his lawyers, trying to dismantle the web of lies that Evelyn had woven. "The situation is complicated," his lead attorney explained during a morning call. "Evelyn managed to convince a judge that there's imminent risk to the children. She has witnesses willing to testify that you forced a 4-year-old girl to work in inappropriate conditions." "False witnesses," Bennett said through gritted teeth. "Probably, but they look convincing on paper. Former employees of the orphanage, a retired social worker, even the manager of that restaurant where you met." Bennett remembered the arrogant man who had tried to throw Hope out on the night of the storm. Evelyn had done her homework, gathering people willing to lie in exchange for money or favors. "There's more bad news," the attorney continued. "They issued a search and arrest warrant. Officially, you're being sought for kidnapping of minors." Bennett felt the floor move beneath his feet. "Kidnapping? My own adopted daughters?" "Evelyn is claiming that the adoption was fraudulent, that Kieran didn't have the legal authority to transfer custody, and technically, while that's being investigated, the children are still under the original jurisdiction." Bennett hung up the phone and went to find Kieran, who was helping the girls feed the chickens on the farm. The scene was so normal, so peaceful, that for a moment he almost managed to forget that they were fugitives. "We need to talk," he said quietly to Kieran. They moved away so as not to scare the girls, but Bennett could see Hope watching them with those intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "The situation has gotten worse," Bennett explained. "Evelyn got a warrant. Now we are officially wanted." Kieran ran a hand through his hair, his expression desperate. "Maybe we should go back, face this in court." "With what evidence?" "She has false witnesses, documents that look legitimate, and a legal system that is clearly working in her favor." Bennett looked at the girls playing in the field. "I can't risk them going back to that hell." "So what do we do?" "We find Maria." Kieran stared at him. "What do you mean?" "Hope said Evelyn made Maria disappear. But if she's still alive, if we can find her, she can testify about Evelyn's corruption. It could change everything." "Bennett, you're talking about a woman who disappeared 2 years ago. She may be dead. Or she may be in hiding, too afraid to come back." Bennett took out the pendant that Hope had given him. "This little object may be the key to finding her." That afternoon, Bennett made a decision that would change everything. He left Kieran taking care of the girls on the farm and drove to the neighboring town, where there was a jeweler specializing in antique pieces. If the pendant really contained clues about Maria's whereabouts, he needed to find out what they were. The jeweler, an elderly man with thick glasses, examined the pendant under a powerful magnifying glass for several minutes. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting. What do you see?" "This is not a common pendant. Look here on the back." He pointed to almost invisible markings, geographical coordinates laser engraved, very discreet. Very clever. Bennett felt his heart race. "Coordinates for where?" The jeweler wrote the numbers on a piece of paper. I would need to consult a detailed map, but from the formatting they seem to reference a location in the mountainous region, perhaps about 4 hours' drive from here. Bennett left the jewelry store with renewed hope. If his suspicions were correct, Maria had left clues about her whereabouts for Hope, knowing that the girl was intelligent enough to eventually figure out the meaning. When he returned to the farm, he found a scene that made his heart melt. The 4 girls were sitting in a circle on the lawn, and Hope was telling them a story, using different voices for each character. It was a vision of innocence and happiness that contrasted brutally with the reality that they were all fugitives. "Mr. Bennett!" shouted one of the girls when she saw him. "Hope was telling us about a brave princess who saves other children from an evil dragon." "Sounds like a very interesting story," Bennett smiled, but his eyes met Hope's. There was something in her gaze that suggested that the story wasn't just fantasy. That night, after the girls fell asleep, Bennett showed his discovery to Kieran and Hope. When she saw the coordinates, her eyes lit up. "I knew it," she said in a low voice, so as not to wake the others. "Maria always said that if anything happened, she would leave clues for me. She taught me about coordinates when we were studying geography." "Do you think she's really there?" Kieran asked. "There's only one way to find out," Bennett replied. "But it's risky. If she's not there or if it's a trap." "It's not a trap," Hope said with absolute certainty. "Maria loved me. She would never do anything to hurt me." Bennett observed that extraordinary girl, still so small, but carrying a wisdom and courage that constantly impressed him. "Okay. Tomorrow morning the 3 of us will look for Maria. But the other girls stay here with—" "No," Hope interrupted firmly. "We never separate. It's our rule since we fled the orphanage. Where one goes, all go." Bennett was going to protest, but he saw the unwavering determination in her eyes. These girls had survived on the streets because they stayed together, because they looked after each other. He didn't have the right to break that bond now. "Okay," he agreed, "but if there's any sign of danger, you do exactly what I say." "We promise," Hope said, speaking for them all. The next morning they left before dawn. Bennett had studied the coordinates during the night and discovered that they led to a small village in the mountains, a place so remote that it barely appeared on the maps. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could disappear if they wanted to never be found again. The journey was long and winding, climbing along mountain roads that became increasingly narrow and precarious. The girls slept in the back seat, exhausted by the tension of the last few days. "Bennett," Kieran said during the journey, "what happens if we find Maria and she confirms everything about Evelyn? Then we have our proof. We can go back and fight this in court with real evidence. And if we don't find her?" Bennett didn't answer immediately. The truth was that if they didn't find Maria, their options would be very limited. They couldn't run forever, especially with 4 small children. Eventually, Evelyn would find them, or the legal system would force them to surrender. "We'll find her," he said finally, because the alternative was unthinkable. When they finally arrived at the village, Bennett felt as if they had traveled to another century. It was a tiny place, with perhaps 50 houses scattered along a single main street. There were no signs of modernity, no traffic lights, no advertising signs, no traffic. "How are we going to find someone specific in a place like this?" Kieran asked. It was Hope who answered, pointing to a small wooden school at the end of the street. "If Maria is here, that's where she'll be. She always said that a good teacher never stops teaching." Bennett parked the car and watched the simple building. There were children playing in the dirt courtyard, their laughter echoing through the mountains. It was a scene of absolute peace, a world completely different from the corruption and manipulation they had left behind. "Let's find out," he said, helping the girls get out of the car. As they walked towards the school, Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something that would change everything. For better or worse, their journey was reaching a crucial point. The door of the school was open, and they could hear the soft voice of a woman teaching mathematics to small children. Hope stopped at the entrance, her body rigid with anticipation. "Is it her?" Bennett whispered. Hope listened for a few more moments, then turned to him with tears in her eyes and a radiant smile on her face. "It's her," she said simply. "It's my Maria." The reunion between Hope and Maria was one of the most emotional moments that Bennett had ever witnessed. The middle-aged woman with graying hair and gentle eyes dropped the chalk she was holding when she saw the girl standing in the doorway of the classroom. "Hope?" she whispered, as if she were seeing a ghost. "My dear girl, how did you find me?" "The necklace you gave me," Hope replied, running into the teacher's arms. "I knew it had a secret." Bennett watched the two embrace, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. They had found Maria, but now they faced the challenge of convincing her to return and testify against Evelyn, knowing the risks involved. "Maria," he said, approaching carefully, "my name is Bennett. Hope has been living with me for the past few months." The woman studied him with eyes that seemed to see through masks and pretenses. "I know who you are," she said finally. "News reaches even this isolated place. Evelyn is saying terrible things about you." "All lies," Kieran said, introducing himself. "I'm Hope's brother. We're on the run because Evelyn managed to convince the authorities that Bennett is dangerous." Maria sighed deeply, her expression turning somber. "Evelyn has always been like that, capable of twisting the truth until it becomes unrecognizable." She looked at Hope. "Honey, did you tell them about what Evelyn really did at the orphanage?" "I told them some pieces," Hope admitted, "but I'm still afraid to tell everything." "You don't need to be afraid anymore," Maria said softly. "Not here, not with me." She dismissed her students early and took them to her small house attached to the school. It was a simple but welcoming place, with books piled on every available surface and children's drawings taped to the walls. "I've been hiding here for 2 years, she explained as she brewed tea. "When I found out what Evelyn was doing, I tried to report it through the proper channels, but she had connections everywhere. My life became hell." "What kind of threats did you receive?" Bennett asked. "First they were subtle. Problems with my professional documentation, difficulties renewing my teaching license, mysterious irregularities in my bank account." Maria paused, her eyes filling with tears. "Then they became more direct. Calls in the middle of the night, strange cars parked in front of my house, explicit threats about what would happen if I continued making problems." "And you never thought about going to the police?" "You don't understand," she said bitterly. "Evelyn doesn't work alone. She's part of a network. Social workers, judges, local politicians. Everyone makes money from the corrupt system she created." Bennett felt a chill. If Maria was right, they weren't just fighting a corrupt orphanage director. They were facing a much larger conspiracy. "How exactly does Evelyn make money from the children?" Kieran asked. Maria looked at Hope and the other girls, who were playing quietly in the corner of the room. "It's better if they don't hear this," she said softly. After the girls went to the yard to play, Maria revealed the full truth about Evelyn's operations. It was worse than any of them had imagined. The orphanage receives substantial government funds for each child registered, but Evelyn never uses that money to care for them properly. Instead, she keeps the children in miserable conditions and pockets the difference. Maria paused, taking a deep breath. "But that's just the beginning." "Continue," Bennett encouraged, although he already suspected that he didn't want to hear the rest. "She forces the older children to beg on the streets, keeping all the money. The younger ones are borrowed to couples who want to appear to have children to get social benefits or for fake adoptions. And the smartest ones, like Hope," Bennett completed, "like Hope, are used for more sophisticated schemes. Evelyn discovered that intelligent children can be very useful. They can enter places where adults would be suspected. They can overhear important conversations. They can even be trained for petty theft in high-end establishments." Bennett felt nausea rising in his throat. Hope never told me anything about this. Because Evelyn is very clever. She uses a system of rewards and punishments that makes children believe they are partners, not victims. Children who collaborate receive better food, cleaner clothes, even small privileges. Those who resist— Maria didn't finish the sentence. Was that why you tried to protect Hope? Hope was special. Her natural intelligence caught Evelyn's attention immediately. She was being prepared for increasingly dangerous operations. Maria wiped her eyes. I tried to teach her secretly, give her knowledge that could protect her. But when Evelyn found out about my extra lessons— She threatened you? She said that if I continued interfering, Hope would be punished. Not me. Hope. The pain in Maria's voice was palpable. So I stopped trying to help directly and started documenting everything I saw. I thought that if I had enough evidence, I could expose the whole operation. Bennett leaned forward. What kind of evidence? Maria got up and went to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. From there, she took out a thick folder full of documents, photographs, and recordings. 2 years of careful investigation, she said, placing the folder on the table. Financial records showing the embezzlement of funds, photographs of children being forced to work, recordings of conversations where Evelyn discusses her schemes with accomplices. Bennett examined some of the documents and was shocked by the extent of the operation. It wasn't just a few minor irregularities. It was a systematic system of child exploitation involving hundreds of children and millions in embezzled money. Why didn't you ever use this? Because Evelyn has protection in high places. When I tried to take this evidence to the authorities, I found out that she had gotten there first. Suddenly, I was an unstable teacher with dangerous obsessions about imaginary conspiracies. But now things are different, Kieran said. Bennett has resources and connections that you didn't have. Together you can expose this. Maria looked out the window, where Hope was teaching the other girls how to identify different types of plants. I want to believe that, but Evelyn isn't just corrupt. She's dangerous. If we go back, if we try to expose her, she won't just try to discredit us. She will try to destroy us completely. So what do we suggest? Bennett asked. That we stay hidden forever while hundreds of children continue to suffer? I don't know, Maria admitted. I only know that if we make a mistake, if we underestimate Evelyn, Hope and the other girls will pay the price. At that moment, Hope appeared at the door, her big eyes fixed on the folder of evidence on the table. Maria, are these pictures of the orphanage? They are, honey. And will they help stop Evelyn from hurting other children? We hope so. Hope walked to the table and touched the folder reverently. Then we have to use them. We can't let other children suffer just because we're afraid. The moral simplicity of the statement silenced all the adults in the room. A 4-year-old had summarized the ethical issue more clearly than any of them could have. She's right, Bennett said finally. We can't hide while Evelyn continues to destroy lives. Maria nodded slowly. Then let's do it. But this time, let's do it right. Let's make sure we have everything we need before we confront her. What do you mean? Evelyn has local protection, but her connections have limits. If we take this evidence to the federal authorities, to national investigative journalists, to international child protection organizations— Maria smiled for the first time since they had arrived. She may have bought local influence, but she can't buy everyone. Bennett felt a wave of renewed hope. They finally had a plan that could work, a plan that could not only protect Hope and her friends, but also save all the other children in Evelyn's clutches. How long do we need to organize everything? A few weeks, maybe a month. Enough time to copy all the evidence, contact the right media outlets, and build a case so solid that not even Evelyn's allies can ignore. Bennett looked at Hope, who was listening to everything with serious attention. What do you think? Can we stay hidden here for a few more weeks? If it's to save the other children, she replied without hesitating. "We can stay as long as it takes." As the sun set over the mountains, Bennett felt for the first time in weeks that maybe there was real hope. It wouldn't be easy, and the risks were enormous, but they finally had the weapons they needed to fight Evelyn. The war was far from over, but for the first time, they had a real chance of winning. The 3 weeks that followed in the mountain village were the most intense of Bennett's life. During the day, he and Maria worked tirelessly, organizing evidence, contacting investigative journalists, and building a network of support that extended far beyond the local borders, where Evelyn had influence. Hope proved to be an extraordinary assistant in the process. Her photographic memory allowed her to provide specific details about operations she had witnessed at the orphanage, details that corroborated the documentary evidence that Maria had collected. Evelyn always held the important meetings in the secret room behind the kitchen, Hope explained one afternoon, while helping to organize photographs. She thought no one knew about that room, but I found out when I was cleaning. I heard her talking about shipments and special merchandise. Bennett felt a chill. Shipments of what? Children, Maria replied grimly. I discovered that Evelyn not only exploits the children locally, she has connections with trafficking networks that move children to other cities, other states. The magnitude of the criminal operation they were uncovering was staggering. What had begun as the corruption of an orphanage director had revealed itself to be a gear in a much larger and more sinister machine. "Do we have enough contacts now?" Kieran asked one night, examining the growing list of journalists, federal authorities, and international organizations that had agreed to investigate the allegations. "Almost," Bennett replied. "But we still need something more. Something that makes it impossible for Evelyn to escape or blame other people." It was Hope who suggested the solution, with the brilliant simplicity that characterized her thinking. "What if she incriminated herself?" she asked during dinner. "What do you mean, honey?" Maria asked. "Evelyn is very proud. She likes to boast about how clever she is, how she fools everyone." Hope paused, thinking. If someone she wanted to impress showed up, someone important, she would tell everything. Bennett immediately understood what she was getting at. An infiltration operation. Exactly. Evelyn doesn't know me personally. To her, I'm just the rich guy who's causing problems. If I showed up pretending to want to do business with her, it would be too dangerous, Kieran protested. If she suspects, she won't suspect if it's done correctly. Bennett was beginning to visualize the plan. My fortune is real, my business reputation is solid. If I show up offering investment in her operations, she will want to impress me with the extent of her network. Maria shook her head. Bennett, you don't understand the kind of people Evelyn works with. If they find out you're trying to expose them, then they won't find out, he said firmly. We'll do it so that I leave with irrefutable evidence before they realize what happened. During the following days, they refined the plan meticulously. Bennett would use his real identity, but invent a story about looking for discreet investment opportunities after the media problems he had faced. For someone like Evelyn, a rich businessman wanting to invest dirty money would be an irresistible opportunity. Do you remember everything you need to do? Maria asked on the morning that Bennett was to leave to meet Evelyn. Get her to admit to the trafficking operations, obtain details about her contacts in the local authorities, and get out of there with recorded evidence of everything. Bennett checked the small recorder hidden in his clothes. And most importantly, don't give any indication of where you are. Be careful, Hope said, hugging him tight. Evelyn is more dangerous than she seems. Bennett drove back to the city with his heart pounding. He hadn't spoken to anyone in his professional circle for weeks, and his company was certainly facing difficulties in his absence. But none of that mattered compared to what was at stake. He requested a meeting with Evelyn through intermediaries, presenting himself as a businessman interested in diversifying investments after his recent legal troubles. As predicted, Evelyn accepted the meeting immediately. They met in a discreet restaurant, ironically the same one where Bennett had met Hope. The woman who arrived was very different from the authoritarian figure who had invaded his home weeks before. Evelyn had dressed to impress, with expensive clothes and jewelry that clearly cost more than an orphanage director should be able to afford. "Mr. Bennett," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a pleasant surprise. I heard you had some problems recently. Problems that made me rethink my investment priorities," Bennett replied carefully. "I've discovered that sometimes it's better to work with people who understand how to navigate the system without attracting unnecessary attention." Evelyn's eyes gleamed with interest. "Continue." "I have a considerable fortune that needs to be diversified. Stocks, real estate, and cryptocurrencies are too traceable. I'm looking for more discrete investment opportunities. And what makes you think I could help you with that?" Bennett leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Because you've created an impressive system, an operation that generates consistent profits while maintaining a facade of social respectability. It's exactly the type of business model I admire." Evelyn couldn't disguise the pride in her expression. "You've done your research." "I have. And I was impressed with the scale of your operations. It's not easy to coordinate multiple sources of income while keeping the local authorities happy." "It's not indeed," Evelyn agreed, clearly enjoying the praise. "It took years to build the right connections, establish the appropriate channels. Channels for moving merchandise?" Evelyn paused, studying Bennett carefully. For a moment, he thought he had gone too far. Too fast. But then she smiled. "You really did your homework, didn't you?" "I always do when it comes to potential high-return investments." "Very well. Yes, we have established channels for moving special merchandise. We have contracts with carriers in 5 different states, distribution points in 10 major cities, and a network of clients that pays premium values for quality products." Bennett felt nauseous as he heard Evelyn describe children as merchandise and products, but he kept his expression neutral. "And the interference from the authorities?" "Not a problem," Evelyn said arrogantly. "I have agreements with key people in the local judicial system, in social services, and even some contacts in the state police. They understand that everyone benefits when certain issues are handled discreetly." "Impressive. And what would be the potential return on investment?" Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with greed. "For someone with your net worth? I'm talking about 300% returns per year. Of course, that would require a significant initial investment." "What kind of initial investment?" "For full entry into the business, with access to all operations. 2 million in untraceable cash." Bennett pretended to consider the proposal, while internally marveling at her audacity. Evelyn was literally putting a price on the sale of children. "And the operations would include?" "Everything. From basic local arrangements to special shipments to international clients. I have contacts in at least 3 countries that pay extraordinary amounts for certain specialties." Bennett felt like vomiting but forced himself to continue. "What kind of guarantees do you offer about the discretion of the operation?" "Absolute guarantees. My protection network includes a state judge, 2 prosecutors, and the head of regional social services. No investigation gets close to us without us being warned in advance." It was exactly what Bennett needed to hear. Evelyn had just admitted not only her criminal operations, but had also specifically named her accomplices in the corruption of the legal system. "Seems like a very interesting opportunity," he said. "I need a few days to organize the financial resources." "Naturally, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this are rare." When Bennett left the restaurant, his hands were shaking so much that he could barely start the car. He had gotten the evidence he needed, but the emotional cost of feigning interest in Evelyn's atrocities had been almost unbearable. He drove straight to an office he had secretly rented in the city, where copies of all the evidence were being prepared for simultaneous distribution to dozens of authorities and organizations. "Did you get it?" his lawyer asked as soon as he arrived. Bennett handed over the recorder. Everything. Explicit admissions about child trafficking, bribery of authorities, and specific names of all her accomplices. Then it's time. Bennett nodded. Activate all contacts. I want the evidence delivered simultaneously to every journalist, every federal agency, every international organization on our list. Evelyn may have bought local protection, but she can't stop an avalanche. As his lawyer began to make the calls that would destroy Evelyn's criminal empire, Bennett thought of the 4 girls who were waiting for him in the mountains. Finally, after months of fear and escape, they would be truly safe. But first, he needed to go back and take them home. The avalanche began the next morning. Bennett woke up to the incessant sound of his phone ringing. But this time the calls didn't bring bad news. They were journalists confirming that the evidence had been delivered simultaneously to all competent federal authorities. The operation was a complete success, his lawyer reported during a morning call. The FBI has already issued arrest warrants for Evelyn and 16 accomplices. 3 local judges have been removed from their positions, and the Justice Department has opened a full investigation into the entire corruption network. Bennett felt a relief so intense that his legs went weak. And Evelyn, arrested in the early hours trying to flee the country. They found more than $500,000 in cash in her luggage, in addition to documents that prove international connections even more extensive than we imagined. For the first time in months, Bennett smiled genuinely. Can I go home? Not only can you, but should. All charges against you have been officially dropped. The judge who signed the original arrest warrant was one of those arrested in this morning's operation. Bennett hung up and immediately called the farm where he had left the girls. Maria answered on the first ring. Bennett, we saw the news on television. Is it real? Was Evelyn really arrested? It's real. It's all over. We can go home. He heard shouts of joy in the background, the voices of the 4 girls celebrating the news. But it was Hope's voice that he heard most clearly, asking, does that mean we'll never have to hide again? Never again, Bennett confirmed, feeling tears of relief stream down his face. The trip back to the city was completely different from the desperate escape of weeks before. The girls sang in the back seat. Maria smiled for the first time since they had reunited, and Bennett felt that he could finally breathe again. But it was when they arrived at the mansion that the real surprise awaited them. The gate was open, and there were at least 20 cars parked in the driveway. Bennett felt a moment of panic until he recognized some of the vehicles. They were from journalists, but this time they were there for completely different reasons. Mr. Bennett, a reporter shouted when he got out of the car. How does it feel knowing that your actions exposed one of the largest child trafficking networks in the region? You are heroes, another journalist shouted. Would the brave girl who helped you like to make a statement? Bennett instinctively positioned himself in front of the girls, protecting them from the turmoil. But it was Hope who stepped forward, her tiny hand finding his. We didn't do this to be heroes, she said in her clear, steady voice, surprising everyone with her composure. We did it to protect other children who couldn't protect themselves. The cameras captured every word, and Bennett knew at that moment that Hope's simple and profound statement would be remembered for a long time. In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to normal, although a normal completely different from what it had been before. Bennett's mansion officially became home to 4 extraordinary girls, and occasionally to a teacher who had become an integral part of the family. How are you feeling about all this? Kieran asked one afternoon, watching the girls play in the garden while Maria taught them about botany. Different, Bennett admitted. My life had a purpose before, to accumulate wealth, to expand businesses, but now... He paused, watching Hope explain something complex to one of the younger girls. Now, I feel like my life has meaning. What about the future? Do you intend to adopt all of them officially? If they want to, Bennett replied. But I've discovered that family isn't just about legal papers. It's about choosing to care for each other, protect each other, like a company, but with love instead of profit." Bennett laughed. "Exactly like that. Although my investments continue to yield impressive dividends, I now know what they're really for. To give these girls everything they deserve: education, security, opportunities." That night, during dinner, something extraordinary happened. Hope, who had remained strong and mature throughout the ordeal, finally allowed herself to be just a child. She began to laugh at something silly that one of the other girls had said, and the laughter became contagious. Soon, all the girls were laughing. Then Kieran, then Maria, and finally Bennett. It was a laugh of pure relief, of genuine happiness, of a family that had survived the storm and emerged stronger. "You know what impresses me most about all of this?" Maria said after the girls had gone to sleep. "What?" "How Hope never lost her ability to trust, even after everything she went through. She chose to trust you when she could have chosen distrust." Bennett thought about that, remembering that first night at the restaurant when a small, soaked girl had refused his charity but accepted his offer of work. "I think she taught me more about trust than I taught her," he admitted. "That's what children do," Maria smiled. "They remind us of who we really are beneath all our defenses and fears." 6 months later, Bennett was in his office when he received a call that would change everything once again. It was a social worker from the government, but this time with completely different news. "Mr. Bennett, I have a proposal to make. After the success in exposing Evelyn's network, the government is interested in creating a pilot program for alternative foster homes for at-risk children. We would like you to consider leading this initiative." Bennett looked out the window of his office, where he could see Hope in the garden, teaching math to a group of neighborhood children who had begun to come regularly for free extra lessons. "What kind of program?" he asked. "Partnerships between successful entrepreneurs and education professionals to create safe temporary homes, using your experience and resources to replicate the model that works so well in your home." Bennett smiled. His fortune had grown exponentially in recent months. His investments in international stocks and cryptocurrencies had yielded extraordinary profits. But for the first time, he knew exactly how he wanted to use that wealth. "I'm interested," he said, "but I have a few conditions." "What?" "Maria will be our educational director. The children will have a voice in all decisions that affect them, and we will never, under any circumstances, separate groups of children who consider themselves family. I accept all the conditions." When Bennett hung up the phone, he found Hope standing in the doorway of his office, as if she knew that something important had happened. "Was that about us?" she asked. "It was about helping other children like you," Bennett corrected. Hope smiled, that radiant smile that had changed his life forever. "Can I help?" Bennett picked her up, as he had done so many times in recent months. "Honey, you're already helping. You taught me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or net worth. It's in giving people the chance to discover their own strength. And you taught me that some adults keep their promises," she replied, hugging him tight. As he watched the sun set over his property, Bennett reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. A violent storm had brought a little girl into his life, and that girl had become the light that illuminated his path back to humanity. His company continued to thrive, his investments continued to generate impressive returns, but now he knew that true success was measured in a completely different way. It was measured in genuine smiles, in trust earned, in lives transformed, and in the certainty that each day brought the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. The rich boy had become a truly wealthy man, rich in love, purpose, and hope. A year after Evelyn's arrest, Bennett was preparing for an event that would change his life forever. The grand room of his mansion had been transformed for a very special ceremony, the official adoption of the 4 girls who were already his daughters in every sense that truly mattered. "Mr. Bennett," said Hope, now 5 years old but still seeming younger due to her delicacy. Why do we need papers if we are already a family? Because sometimes it's important for the whole world to officially know what our hearts have known for a long time, he replied, adjusting her new dress. The other 3 girls ran through the house with contagious excitement. Maria had moved permanently into the mansion, occupying the role of educational tutor and second mother to the girls. Kieran visited regularly, proudly assuming the role of favorite uncle. "Are you nervous?" Kieran asked, finding Bennett in the library where he was trying to calm down before the ceremony. "Terrified," Bennett admitted with a smile. "Not about the responsibility. I assumed that a long time ago, but about the emotion of making it all official." The judge who would preside over the ceremony was completely different from those whom Evelyn had corrupted. She was a young woman, newly appointed, with an impeccable reputation for truly caring about the well-being of children. "Mr. Bennett," she said when she arrived, "I rarely witness cases where it's so obvious that an adoption is in the best interest of everyone involved. These girls clearly love you, and your dedication to them is evident." The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. One by one, each girl answered the judge's questions about her wishes, her small but firm voices confirming that they wanted to be officially part of Bennett's family. When it was Hope's turn, she surprised everyone with her elaborate answer. "Your Honor," she said with the formality she had learned from Maria, "Mr. Bennett isn't just adopting me. I'm also adopting him as my father, and I adopt these girls as my sisters forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony, during the party in the garden, Bennett received a call that would bring the final closure to his journey with Hope. "Bennett, this is Dr. Santos from the correctional facility. Evelyn asked to speak with you. She said she has important information about the case." Bennett hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to revive painful memories on the happiest day of his new family. "Mr. Bennett," said Hope, who had overheard part of the conversation, "if she wants to talk to us, maybe we should listen. Sometimes bad people try to become less bad in the end." The wisdom of the observation surprised him once again. "Okay, but you don't have to come with me." "I want to go," Hope said firmly. "She was part of my story. I want to see the end of that part." At the correctional facility, Evelyn was unrecognizable. The arrogant and manipulative woman had become a hunched figure, with grey hair and eyes that carried the weight of her guilt. "Hope," she said when she saw them, "you've grown up." "I've grown up," Hope replied simply, without hostility but also without warmth. I wanted to ask for forgiveness. For everything I did. With you. With the other children." Evelyn's voice was broken. "And I want to tell you something about Maria." "What about her?" "She tried to stop me much more often than you know. Sent anonymous letters to authorities, made denunciations that were ignored. Even tried to confront some of my business partners." Evelyn paused, breathing with difficulty. "She loved you like a daughter, Hope. Everything she did was to protect you." "I already knew that," Hope replied calmly. "People who love us always try to protect us." Evelyn looked at Bennett. "And you? I underestimated what a man with real resources and genuine determination could do. You destroyed everything I took years to build." "Good," Bennett said without remorse. "It was something that needed to be destroyed. The other children, are they okay?" "All have been placed in safe homes or reunited with family members. Many are in the alternative foster care program we created based on our experience." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then maybe something good has come out of all this." As they were leaving, Hope turned around one last time. "Miss Shaw, I hope you find peace." The simplicity of the forgiveness left Evelyn in tears. In the car, going home, Bennett asked, "How can you forgive someone who hurt you so much?" "Because holding anger hurts me more than it hurts her," Hope replied. "And because now I have much better things to fill my heart with." 6 months later, Bennett was watching Hope teach a group of newly arrived children in the alternative foster care program. At 5 years old, she had become a natural mentor to younger children in vulnerable situations. "How does she do it?" Kieran asked, joining Bennett on the veranda. "Does what?" "Turns pain into strength, fear into courage, sadness into hope." Bennett smiled, watching his daughter help a little girl with a math problem. "I think it's because she understands that our story doesn't have to define us. We can choose to write new chapters." "And you? What chapter are you writing now?" Bennett thought about the question. His company had expanded internationally. His investments in social funds were generating impressive returns, and the alternative foster care program had become a national model. But none of that seemed as important as the girl who was teaching other children that they too could overcome their circumstances. "I'm writing a chapter about discovering that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share," he said finally. "Sounds like a good chapter. It's the best I've ever written." That night, during the family dinner, now a table for 7, including Maria and often Kieran, Hope made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to change my name," she said. "To what, honey?" Maria asked. "Hope Maria Bennett Santos," she replied solemnly. "Hope because that's what Father Bennett gave me. Maria in honor of my first teacher. Bennett because I'm his daughter now. And Santos because that has always been my blood family." Bennett felt tears welling up in his eyes. "It would be an honor to have my name as part of yours. And I would be proud to share my name with you," added Maria. 5 years later, Bennett was in the audience of a prestigious school, watching a 10-year-old girl who looked like a miniature version of the extraordinary woman she would become, receive an award for academic excellence. "Hope Maria Bennett Santos," announced the principal, "for her exceptional grades and, more importantly, for her outstanding volunteer work with at-risk children." As she went on stage to receive the award, Hope looked for Bennett in the audience and gave him that radiant smile that had changed his life forever. At that moment, Bennett fully understood what had happened that rainy night years before. He had thought he was saving a girl, but in reality, she had saved him. She had taught him that courage doesn't mean absence of fear, but choosing to do what is right despite the fear. She had shown him that family isn't about blood or legal papers, but about choosing to love and protect each other unconditionally. And most importantly, she had proven to him that no matter how dark the beginning of our story, we can always choose an ending full of light. As he applauded his extraordinary daughter, Bennett smiled, knowing that the girl who had entered his life during a storm had become the brightest sunshine he had ever known, and that light would continue shining, illuminating the path for other children who needed to discover their own strength, their own hope, their own ability to transform pain into power. The story had begun with a storm, but it ended with a rainbow. And Bennett knew that this was just the beginning of something even greater.